In this video, we're going to explore how to coach. The most important thing that you have to keep in mind is that coaching is by providing self-discovery for the coachee. They need to discover the lesson. They need to internalize it for it to really last, for it to be owned knowledge. Ultimately, when they earn that knowledge, when they earn that capability, it will be dramatically more sustainable versus just something that you tell them. But coaching put into the process of self-discovery can both reduce the risk of error in the self-discovery and increase the speed. What I mean by that is that we can learn the wrong things from our experiences. Experience is not just what we've been through, it's what we take away from it, and we can take the wrong things away from it. And so coaching can help reduce that error. But it can also increase the speed by designing the right process by which people can discover. So coaches create experiences. Now sometimes the experience is sitting there waiting, but how you shape that engagement creates experiences. In coaching soccer, there's a phrase we like to use, that the game is the best teacher. The idea is that don't over-prescribe and over-script the lesson, but provide situations or experiences where they can go out and have success and failure and learn through self-discovery from the game itself. And problem solving is very much the same way. Learning by engaging in problems, experiencing both success and failure will all lead to better takeaways, better skill, better capability. And coaches do this by helping coachees reflect on those experiences. That is how we shape what they take away from what they've experienced. So we're going to go into a model that's fundamental to Lean, but we're going to really apply it to coaching. And it's PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act. But we're not going to just look at one PDSA cycle. We're going to look at two. We're going to look at how the PDSA cycle of the coachee and the PDSA cycle of the coach really work together. So let's go to the board and start to see how this works. Come on. So as we talk through the coaching model, the whole point of coaching is to help the other person discover or self-discover what they need to learn. This internal learning is what ultimately leads to sustainable skills, perspectives, beliefs, behaviors, etc. Now you can use all sorts of different models, the learning models that allow for learning and integrate it into what I'm going to share, but I always prefer sort of the classic PDSA or Plan, Do, Study, Act as a base model to use. So we're going to use that. You can certainly modify as you see fit. Now, as you think about this, what you're trying to do is help create experiences for people. So you are creating this as a container for their self-discovery, right? So you are the architect of the PDSA cycle. As the coach, they are the executors of that PDSA cycle. So you're going to make sure that they have a plan, but again, it's their plan that leads to do. That's where they actually execute whatever that plan is, and we'll connect this back to problem solving. Study is where they reflect or evaluate or observe what they got and ultimately learn. And based on what they did learn, they can take those lessons, turn them into standards or adjustments back to their plan. Now ultimately, you want to create many cycles of this, kind of get around this loop many times to understand the learning. So as it applies to problem solving, there's really sort of two different ways. There's the event-based and there's the cadence-based. So for cadence-based, we'll kind of plan, just imagine a weekly cadence. And it's not weekly. There's been people I've coached that we've had a quarterly cadence on. So there's no right answer. But we'll just explore this as a weekly cadence. You might have help them on Monday to make sure that they have a good plan. You have a conversation. What is their perspective? How are they thinking about their work, their problem, how they're going to overcome their problem. Then, of course, throughout the rest of the week, they actually do their plan, whatever that might be. And on Friday, you come back and help them study. They help them evaluate How did your plan go? What assumptions were correct? How did the work go? Was it clear? Was it confusing? Did you learn? And then they come back and again repeat the cycle another time. So that might be an event cadence-based process where every week you are helping them, and whether in a single week they solve 10 small problems, or they're only 10% of the way through a single problem, really doesn't matter. It's about having that continued cycle. So people that I've only coached once a quarter, we might review a quarter's worth of work on our study process, and then make sure that they have a plan for what they're going to do to adjust their work for the quarter ahead, and then we come back. So that's sort of creating that PDSA where they get to self-discover, and again, you become the architect of that overall process. Now, event-based, I think, when possible, when you have that accessibility to the coach, sort of free form and available when you need it, I believe event-based is even more powerful when it comes to problem solving. The reason is that each time you turn this loop, it's based on the steps of problem solving, whether you're using 8-step problem solving or simple A3s or just 5 whys or just observe or find a problem, fix a problem. I really don't care what your problem solving methodology is, but in any case, there's pivotal moments in that problem solving where the coach can come into play. So let's examine the first loop through, where we go through is the problem statement itself. So we start to understand the problem statement, we help them examine the problem statement, come up with how they might articulate it, and then test that problem statement. And so by the time they've done some of this work through the do phase, they come back to you, and we kind of gain some confidence at this point that the problem statement is as correct as it can be at that point in time. And now they're ready to start to understand the current reality. So you might help them going forward to say, well, how do you want, is it process mapping? Is it direct observation? Is it a root cause analysis? How do you want to understand that current reality? And that might be one loop around the circles, just having a plan for current reality. And then the next loop around is the conclusions that they draw. So they've done some process maps, they found where they think the waste is and where the opportunities to improve, and that becomes your second loop. So here we are, we already talked about 3 times around this loop, and all we are up to is kind of coming out of the current reality phase. And so when you think about creating loops for that individual, you are the architect of that. And again, in problem solving, you can either have that cadence-based or you could have event-based while you are driving their PDSA cycles. And so that becomes very fundamental. This is the coachee's PDSA cycle. You are helping them with their self-discovery. Now, the reason we call this double loop PDSA is that the coach also has to learn along with the coachee. Now, certainly any coach should always be improving their own methodology, their own practices, tips and tricks and skills of coaching, but this is more about the personal needs of the coachee, learning what works for them, learning what they need to learn, what their gaps are, what their learning styles are, what their blind spots are. And so because each individual is different, you have to experiment and adjust your coaching based on the needs of the individual. That's the greatness of coaching compared to training, is that it is tailored to each individual's needs. And so this is how these loops fit together. So you have a plan, you come into the process with a plan. Your do as a coach is the coaching conversation that you might have with that individual. So your do is helping them with their plan, and that becomes the connection. Now, fundamentally, you start to look at, well, your study is also their study. This is you studying together. You together have a conversation at the end of the cycle, the end of the step of problem solving, the end of the week, and you are helping them evaluate and learn from what they've done, but that's also your test, your evaluation, your observation of how they are working, what they are learning, and is it working? Did your plan work as intended? But there's also an opportunity to look at studying while they're in the do phase. And so this is more one way because your primary method is to observe. You observe how they are proceeding with their problem solving, and in those observations, you learn more about what's sticking and what's not. If, for example, you were seeing that they plow through current reality, capturing what they already know versus what they don't know, well, now you know more about the gaps in their understanding of problem solving and can make those adjustments. So both parts of this really become part of study. Fundamentally, your study sections are aligned, but there is also this sort of one-way observe part of study. Based on what you learned at that point, you kind of come back, evaluate, make some changes, and come back the next cycle, whatever that might be, with PDSA, with a new plan, with a modification. Now, what's important to understand is that the link of these two might be different based on what's going on. So if you're doing cadence-based in particular, they might complete 10 cycles to your one cycle or one turn of the loop as a coach. If you're doing it more on an event-based, where each step along the way they're coming to you, then more likely it's connected. It's one loop for them, one loop for you. But fundamentally, we're both learning together, right? So the coach is learning over here in their cycle, and the coachee is learning here. And this is really to bring home the point that I believe, because if a coach approaches with this approach, with a PDSA or a learning cycle approach to coaching, then they learn as much about problem solving while being the coach as the person does being the coachee. And this is another reason why I believe coaching is one of the most fundamental practices for driving really effective problem solving.